While Marvel Studios may have refined and popularized the concept of a cinematic universe for modern audiences, they were not the first to feature one. The first shared universe, albeit a pretty loosely connected one by today's standards, came in the form of the Universal Monsters, of which countless movies were made between the 1920s and the 1950s. In the aftermath of the unprecedented, massive success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, however, every other studio in Hollywood began chasing their own cinematic universes. For Universal, the choice was simple: bring the monsters back into the limelight. The first movie to kick off the modern Universal Monsters Cinematic Universe, or Dark Universe as they would end up calling it, is The Mummy. In this video, I will briefly cover the development of the Dark Universe, the challenges with the name, and finally review its first installment, the latest Mummy remake. Please note that in this review there will be no spoilers, only my general impressions. Some of the Universal Monster movies have been remade several times over already, most notably by Hammer Film Productions from the late 1950s to the early 1970s. These were, from early on, made with Universal's approval. Later, a number of monster movies were remade by Universal themselves. There have of course been plenty Dracula and Frankenstein movies made by different studios from all over the world over the years, as the monsters themselves, for the most part, are public domain. But Universal does own the rights to certain design and story elements, making it difficult for anyone else to make movies about the most famous monsters with all the elements associated with them intact. As for The Mummy, audiences today are probably more familiar with Universal's 1999 remake starring Brendan Fraser and its sequels and spin-offs than with Hammer's 1958 version starring Christopher Lee or the 1932 Universal original starring Boris Karloff. The intent to reboot the Mummy franchise again in a new contemporary take was announced on April 4th of 2012, and 1 month later, Universal signed Roberto Orci and Alex Kurtzman of, among other things, Transformers and the Kelvin iteration of Star Trek fame to develop it. That development would take its sweet time. A year and a half after the movie was first announced, in October of 2013, we first learned conclusively that The Mummy would be the start of a shared universe. That's when Orci suggested that the Mummy reboot would share continuity with the planned Van Helsing reboot, which Tom Cruise at the time was attached to star in. By this time, cinematic universes were all the rage, and The Mummy still wasn't scheduled to be released for another 3 years. Not keen to wait that long, Universal retrofitted their long-in-development Dracula Untold to be the beginning of the shared monsters universe. To this end, the scenes featuring the original Master Vampire, played by Charlie Cox, were discarded. Charles Dance was recast in the role instead, and a new ending meant to tie in with the contemporary Mummy remake was filmed. Alas, Dracula Untold did not go down all that well with either fans or critics, and was therefore relegated to the standalone movie it was to begin with, while The Mummy went back to being the launch movie for the Universal Monster Cinematic Universe. After a couple more years of development, Tom Cruise and Sofia Boutella would end up attached to star, Roberto Orci would drop out of producing and be replaced by Chris Morgan, while Alex Kurtzman, the writer and producer, would end up directing as well, after both Len Wiseman and Andres Muschietti dropped out. On June 9th of 2017, more than 5 years after it was first announced, The Mummy would kick off the Universal Monster Cinematic Universe. Of course, that doesn't roll off the tongue all that well, so they came up with another name for it. On May 22nd of 2017, Universal formally announced their cinematic universe as Dark Universe. Someone less than pleased with Universal's choice of name for the aspiring cinematic universe was Warner and DC Entertainment. They have branded their Justice League Dark movie as Dark Universe, and according to The Hollywood Reporter, may be considering taking legal action. As a side note, this suggests that a Justice League Dark movie is an aggressive development, and that we could be seeing Constantine and his associates on film sooner rather than later. For the time being though, Dark Universe now means the Universal Monster Cinematic Universe, In addition to Mummy headliners Tom Cruise and Sofia Boutella, it will down the line also feature Johnny Depp as the Invisible Man and Javier Bardem as Frankenstein's monster. Russell Crowe's character, Henry Jekyll, will tie it all together, as he'll be the Nick Fury of the franchise, running the de facto shield of this universe, the organization Prodigium. After The Mummy, the next planned movie is Bride of Frankenstein, which is scheduled for release in February of 2019. They reportedly want Angelina Jolie for the titular role. According to producer and Mummy director Alex Kurtzman, planned future installments of the Dark Universe after that includes The Invisible Man, Frankenstein, Dracula, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Phantom of the Opera, and The Hunchback of Notre Dame, as well as spin-offs and sequels of varying scales, scopes, and budgets. Of course, planning is cheap. If the plans are actually realized, all depends on The Mummy being at the very least a modest hit. The movie reportedly cost about $125 million to make. According to The Hollywood Reporter, Universal executives are said to be concerned about The Mummy, even though insiders say a $40 million opening weekend, plus a strong overseas haul, would be enough to move forward with the universe as planned. At the time of making this video, tracking for the opening weekend is in the low to mid-30s. If that is an accurate baseline, this is an occasion where reviews absolutely could matter, and the early reviews haven't been kind. As the title of this video should indicate, I have seen the movie, so let's move on to my spoiler-free review. As always, I'm going to begin by letting you know where I'm coming from, and any bias I might have. Of the entire vampire and associated monsters genre, my absolute all-time favorites are, in order, Roman Polanski's The Fearless Vampire Killers, the original Nosferatu, Werner Herzog's Nosferatu remake, The Company of Wolves, and Interview with the Vampire. In other words, I'm all about atmosphere, and I have a preference for movies featuring these monsters being period pieces. As such, I had some apprehensions going in. Moving it to present day does put me off a bit. Tom Cruise being cast as the lead puts me off even more, because his mountains of personal baggage aside, nearly everything he is in tends to become a Tom Cruise vehicle starring Tom Cruise as a stock Tom Cruise character in a movie where Tom Cruise has to run away from explosions and doing Tom Cruise stunts to further hammer in the fact that you are watching a Tom Cruise movie. Most of all though, what had me the most apprehensive was Alex Kurtzman directing. The reason for that is simply that he is a writer responsible for some very questionable decisions, who turned producer responsible for some even more questionable decisions. He has very little prior directorial experience, but then seemingly got uppity and thought he has what it takes to helm a 100 million plus blockbuster. I am not a believer in that particular kind of career trajectory as a general thing. But, contrary to what it might sound like, I don't actually want to see the movie fail. I'm all in favor of this dark universe spawning a new series of modern-day classics. My hope going in was that the movie would prove all the worries I had to be unfounded. So, did the movie prove my concerns to be wrong? No, it didn't. As it happened, all my fears came to pass, even worse than I thought they would. The real downfall of the movie is Kurtzman's lackluster direction. Tonally, the movie is an absolute mess. It tries to be a comedy, it tries to have a buddy cop thing going on, it tries to be scary, and it fails at all of it. The only thing it was remotely successful at was being an action spectacle, but even the action scenes were marred by what has got to be one of the worst, most unsuitable blaring scores of all time, which at no point did anything but to distract from what was going on screen. One of the most important jobs a director has is to bring the best performances out of the cast. Let's just say that I was at all times very acutely aware that what I was watching was acting. Many of the lines and their delivery was so stilted and ham-fisted you'd think George Lucas wrote them. The chemistry between Tom Cruise and his idiot funny sidekick was over the top and unbelievable. The only thing less believable was the relationship between Tom Cruise and his damsel in distress. In fact, the only actors I found to be good and believable were Sofia Boutella and Russell Crowe. They did amazing, but they can't save the movie when nothing else is up to their level. I take no delight in tearing the movie apart, because it could have been really good. It's a crying shame actually, because it should have been really good. All it needed was a smaller budget, another star, a rewrite to take the Tom Cruisisms out, and a director who can decide upon one tone and go for that. I think someone with the visual and tonal sensibilities of, say, Clive Barker or Stuart Gordon could have made a truly memorable movie with all the ingredients at hand. Kurtzman certainly failed to do that, and I am not sure if there are going to be any more installments in the Dark Universe after this. Be sure to let me know your opinion in the comments.
If you like this video, then please hit that subscribe button. Due to recent changes made by YouTube, we also encourage all of our subscribers, both new and old, to please hit that bell icon next to the subscribe button as well, so you will be notified when new videos are uploaded. Be sure to check back for news and analysis of the happenings and corporate politics behind the scenes of your favorite genre movies, as well as explorations of your favorite characters and their backgrounds and context here at Midnight's Edge.